v'haya Eikev tishma'un et mishpatim ha'elu shmartem v'asitem otam. So the first Rashi on the pasuk v'haya Eikev tishma'un ima mitzvot hakalot she'adam dash be'akavav tishma'un. So Rashi says, if you will keep the light mitzvot that a person has a tendency to trample, to tread with his foot, with his shoe, if you'll keep that, so then I'll give you all of these tremendous rewards. As we said yesterday, these are not rewards, these are blessings. And it's interesting that these really, really big blessings that Hashem promises are not for keeping the big mitzvahs, right? The heavy ones. It's for keeping the small ones, the ones that are Eikev that we tend to overlook, or the ones that we trivialize with our by stepping on. And you see over here, and also later on in the Parshas as well, an important idea about Judaism. And what that is that what defines a person's Judaism is not the big things. It's not the huge things. In fact, there is an idea that is said over, and that is that big things, even small people could do. The small things are what big people do. In other words, we know that what's the biggest thing, perhaps, that a Jew could do, and that one of the things, if not the biggest, in terms of extreme, biggest is Kiddush Hashem, is dying. A person giving up his life for Yiddishkeit. And we found throughout history that seemingly simple Jews, obviously there's no such thing as a simple Jew. We're saying that seemingly simple Jews, certainly Jews that were not big adherers of Torah, and perhaps they weren't the most meticulous in terms of learning, in terms of adhering to mitzvahs, when push comes to shove, he's being threatened, convert to Christianity or die at the stake. You'd find that even the Jews that were perhaps minimally religious, that you didn't think were such incredible Baalei Emunah, were able to give their lives. So how come it is that a Jew that's able to give his life for Hashem, but wasn't always the guy that davened 3 times a day, said Kriyat Shema Bizman, was meticulous about all the laws of kashrut, all the mitzvot? Again, so the idea is because sometimes to do a really big thing, even a Jew who's not on that level of greatness could do great things, could do big things. So he says what really makes a Jew excellent or excel in his avodas Hashem, what is the mark of a true servant of Hashem? Not that he's willing to do the big things, it's that he's willing to do the small things. It's actually the small things that a person could say to himself, what's the big deal already? Do I really have to daven 3 times a day? And if I miss putting on tefillin one day, is it the end of the world? Is it so bad? And if I wake up late and I don't say Kriyat Shema at the proper time, or I don't say Shemona Esrei at the proper time, but I'm keeping the big things, right? We know there's the big 3. What are the big 3? Idolatry, Gilui Arayos, morality, and Shvichas Dam. When you talk about the big 3, like today, I'm thinking of Shabbos, Kashrus, and Taras Mishpacha, right? I mean, like, when you're talking about today, what are the big 3 that really identify a Jew as being a Torah Jew? It's keeping Shabbos, keeping Taras Mishpacha, and it's keeping Kashrus, right? Those are like the big 3, right? If a person's keeping these 3, so you're basically, right, we're okay. And that means you're a Torah observant Jew. But the Parshas telling us of Eikev Tishmun, those are things that we don't trample on, because we recognize that those are some of the fundamental areas of Judaism. It doesn't get more fundamental than Shabbos, than Kashrus, than Taras Mishpacha. Those are really the foundations of a practicing Torah Jew. But what the Torah is telling us over here is that to excel at Judaism requires not just the big ones, but the small ones as well. There's 613 out there, right? And a lot of those 613 we don't look at as being, wow, so earth-shattering, so fundamental, like Shabbos and like Kashrus. And the Torah is saying is that's what really sets apart, as they'd say, the men from the boys. The willingness to adhere to all 613, even the ones that seem to us to be very minute, very insignificant, because really when you think about it, if you acknowledge the fact that the same source the same God that told us to keep Shabbos, which we view as being, fundamentally important, the same God that gave us the 10 commandments that tells us do not murder, do not steal, do not commit adultery, those are major. It's the same God that said don't wear shatnez. Do we understand why? Not so much. It's the same God that said don't eat meat and milk. Does it make sense to us? Not really. Same one that said put on tefillin. Hashem, I understand. Right? We all say, I understand. Hashem says don't kill, don't commit adultery, be moral, keep Shabbos because why? Because it's a testimony that Hashem rested on the seventh day, that Hashem created the world, that the world was created out of nothing. There are big ideas behind these mitzvahs, the 10 commandments, honoring your father and mother. It's a fundamentally important thing. The same God that gave us that really cares if I say Shema at 8 o'clock in the morning or whether I say Shema at 9 o'clock in the morning. Let's say that, Sovzman Kriyat Shema is, and it depends, Magen Avram versus Gra, but does Hashem really care if I say Shema? I'm saying Shema. Does he really care if I say it before the time, after the time? And so therefore the Torah says, no, V'haya im Eikev tishmun. If a person is meticulous about the small things, so then he really shows. Then he's showing, I'm not keeping these mitzvahs because I understand them, because their importance makes sense to me. No, some of these mitzvahs, I don't get the importance behind it. But if I acknowledge with humility that I'm doing these things not because I understand them, because the same Creator that gave me Shabbos, that gave me the big ones, gave me the small ones as well, so to speak, and that's why I'm keeping them. So then it elevates all the mitzvahs that I do. Then every mitzvah I do is an illustration of my servitude to Hashem. And really, Moshe Rabbeinu echoes this later on in the beginning of the 5th Aliyah as well. What does he say? After berating the Jewish people over the last few Parshas about the sin of the Meraglim, of the spies, and he berates them for the Cheder Egel, and he's basically telling them about all the various failures that they had and how many times they angered Hashem. At the end, what does Moshe Rabbeinu say after all of his critique? Va'ata Yisrael. Okay, all that was preamble. Okay, Va'ata Yisrael. Now, I'm going to give it to you straight and simple. Ma Hashem Elokecha shel mimach. What does Hashem want from you? Ki im liyirat Hashem Elokecha. He wants you to fear Him. Lalechet b'chol drachav. It sounds like he's coming to minimize things, but it's a pretty long list. He says, now what does Hashem, Moshe says, and now, O Jewish people, what does Hashem want from you? All he wants from you is to fear Him, and to walk in His ways, and to love Him, Hashem, and to serve Him with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Lishmor et mitzvos Hashem vet chukotav. But again, why does he write it like that? Why is he saying it like that? This sounds like a heavy menu. He's basically saying that, at the end of the day, Judaism is not so hard. And he's saying it's not the big things, it's the small things. What does Hashem want from you already? He wants the small thing. And that's what Eikev is. He wants the small things. Obviously, he wants the big things. But he wants the small things because the small things are really what defines how sincere and how serious we take our Yiddishkeit, we take our Judaism. If we only keep the major things, so then ultimately, why are we choosing to keep the major things and not the minor things? Because we think they're major. And we think those are minor. We think these are the big ones. We think those are the small ones. And therefore, we think it's enough to just keep the big ones. At the end of the day, Hashem is saying, I want you to keep the small ones because in my eyes, they're all big. In Hashem's eyes, there's no difference between the big ones and the small ones. And that's why the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says you should always keep the light ones as if they were heavy ones. Why? Because we don't know. Even if we will grant you this idea that some mitzvahs are heavier than others, some mitzvahs are lighter than others, we ultimately don't know which ones are the heavy ones and which are the light ones. We might think that we know which ones are the major ones, right? Because they make sense that these are major. The 10 Commandments we would expect to be major. Shabbos is major. Well, that's one of the 10 Commandments. And we might think we know what the lighter ones are, but ultimately in Hashem's eyes, they're all the same. And so therefore, by keeping all of them, even Eikev, even the small ones, then we're showing that we're keeping all of these mitzvahs not because they make sense to us, but because they are being given to us by the same God that created us. And therefore, the same God that created us knows what we need to lead a successful life. And Hashem says, you know what, for a Jew to lead a successful life, there's a book, there's a guidebook called the Torah, and it comes with 613 mitzvahs. Some seem to you to be light, some seem to you to be heavy. If you only keep the heavy ones and not the light ones, so then you're keeping it because you want to keep it, because you think it's important, not because it is important. But if you keep all of them, then you're showing that what? That they're important to you because they're important to Hashem. And that really is the fundamental, that's the foundation of any covenant, any marriage, right? If something is important to your wife, to your spouse, then it's important to you. Why is it important to you? Not because it's important to you inherently. It's important to you because it's important to your spouse. So over here, if we have a covenant between Hashem and us, so anything that's important to Hashem is important to us. And all 613 are important to Hashem. If they're important to you, Hashem, then I'm going to treat all 613 equally as well. For the small things, all of these blessings, call it reward, call it blessings, all these amazing promises that you'll have children, you won't have sickness, you'll have prosperity, you'll have rain, etc. All these big things are being given to us because we're willing to keep the small things as well. By keeping the small things, we show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're in this marriage, right, in the most faithful way possible. What's important to you, Hashem, is important to us. And therefore, we should keep them all equally.